Hey everyone, Peyton from Unbound here. I'm so glad you decided to tune into a brand new saga of cryptids, the paranormal, and so much more. If you follow me on Reddit, linked to my profile in the description below, you'll be aware that I do analytical write-ups of new photographic and video evidence that crops up in a number of more supernatural subreddits or communities. And while this idea is certainly not a new one, I feel as if I may be able to bring new light to the more forgotten pieces of evidence, images and films that have hardly been analyzed in a great capacity, and which many may never have settled on a satisfactory conclusion. I am by no means an expert in biology, folklore, Photoshop, or anything else relevant to these topics. Like many others, I am very much an armchair skeptic and investigator, but I have a love for thoroughness and the paranormal alike, and I'm on the hunt for genuine evidence. If you will join me. We will travel from the front page of a well-known subreddit to the inky shadows of a stretch of road in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. And along the way, we will throw these images from January of 2018 along Town Line Road into a new light, whether you believe these images were a hoax or not. We will discuss canine anatomy, the original story, a slew of theories, and much, much more. Let's step into the shadows together and unbound this evidence. On January 12, 2020, a Reddit user on r/skinwalkers, a community dedicated to skinwalkers, which are, in the most simple of terms, the Navajo culture's answer to shapeshifters, posted this image with the simple caption, "A friend of mine did this a few days ago." I'd never seen this image before, but it seemed to have promise. That is, assuming that there was a clearer version, or at least a version that was cleaned up by someone with editing skills far greater than my own. I never believed in skinwalkers, but this image was hard to disprove outright. I commented asking for a clearer image, and I got one. Now I was genuinely intrigued, despite remaining skeptical. I began to analyze it as I normally do, discussing with others in the comments and writing out my own opinions and ideas as they came to me. As things began to fall together, I began my write-up on the pair of pictures. The OP, or original poster, added that the images were taken on the Navajo Reserve between the Lukachukai, I probably butchered that, mountains and Shiprock in Arizona, that they had been taken while the friend was driving, which is clear, and that the images had been distributed among the reserve and to the local county sheriff. They also made the comment that they had had their own personal skinwalker experience in Shiprock. My first instinct, although my knowledge on Photoshop is limited at best, is that if these images were made in Photoshop, they were very well done. Other users seem to come to this consensus as well. I'd like to add that I haven't discounted Photoshop as of the making of this video, nor had I done so at the time of speculating. I simply had decided to begin thinking of alternate explanations, natural or otherwise. But I quickly arrived at a separate conclusion. Let's look at the sequence of events that occurred while these images were being taken, presumably on a cell phone. Look at the stance of the creature in image 1, when we can assume the car was still in motion as the driver slowed to take the picture. This is obvious when we see how blurry the image appears and add in the difference in distance between the photographer and the creature that we see in each progressive image. We can assume that the event happened very quickly as the creature is still in the same general area in both photos, and because the image is much clearer and closer to the creature, we can assume that in image 2 the driver is now pulled over. But take a look at this. The stance is still exactly the same. This isn't damning on its own by any means, as a creature could theoretically maintain a fairly consistent gait, but I immediately seized on two things: the distance from the speed limit sign and the angles of the photos. We need to talk about the distance point first, and you'll see why in a moment. In image 1, the distance seems to be great, enough so that the sign is mostly illegible. But in image 2, the distance is much closer, which first suggested to me an inconsistency in the events. I couldn't figure out why the creature would be so far down the road in the second image if it was walking in a straight line. It didn't make sense, and I commented as much. Eventually, another user told me to examine the cracks in the white line along the edges of the road. In image 1, the creature is directly in front of a prominent section, the one with the biggest section of white paint. It's a very distinct chunk of road, and we can see here in image 2 that the creature is directly in front of the same section of road. This means that the images were taken in such quick succession that the creature didn't even have time to move. Or, if it did so minutely that the images hardly captured it. It also means that my entire line of thinking so far was moot. So I began tackling a second aspect of the set: angle. As I mentioned many times during my analysis and write-up, I became obsessed with the angles. They were my linchpin. The entire story seemed to hinge on the progression of events between image 1 and thus angle 1 and image 2 and angle 2. I blew up image 1 and tried to see if maybe the second image was actually just a blown up version of the first, but this was obviously not the case. I lost the sign in the background completely when I tried this, meaning that image 2 was a separate picture and one taken from an entirely different angle. And still, I couldn't imagine anyone being able to pull over and snap another photo so quickly without scaring the creature at all as to make the beast seem stationary between images. It made no sense. It seemed to ultimately suggest that the object in the images was static in the environment. The angles at long last gave me the first inkling of proof that the photographs were hoaxes. Then came an even bigger break in my investigation. But let's take a step back. How does this connect at all to the Beast of Bray Road, which I mentioned in the original opening? And if you don't know what that is, it's this legendary werewolf-like creature that was first spotted in Elkhorn, Wisconsin in 1936. The answer comes in the form of a frantic comment made by user WG Davis78. Your friend sent an article, not his picture, followed by a link to the National Cryptid Society article titled Concerning the Wolf Walking Like a Human, a title I referenced in my own write-up on the images. Turns out that either the original poster or their friend, or both, was lying. As the article detailed, the image actually originated from Elkhorn in January of 2018 and was taken by a man named Danny Morgan. The image supposedly depicted another sighting of the Beast of Bray Road, and although this article proved that the original post was a lie, that did not take away from my investigation into the images themselves. To be honest, finding this connection only fueled it even more. So here's the quote-unquote real story. Danny Morgan had dropped his friend off after a late night spent on the town and was driving back home along the deserted and out-of-the-way Town Line Road, which passes through a great expanse of farmland. Driving near one of these cornfields, Danny spotted a rare sight: a wolf shambling along towards the road. On all fours, mind you. Excited at this encounter, Danny pulled out his cell phone and began slowing down, edging his car towards the shoulder of the road. The wolf approached slowly, stopped, stood, and according to Danny, walked with ease on its hind legs across the road and disappeared into another field. This was an interesting detail. Danny specifically stated that it did not appear awkward when walking, and did so just as any human would, with four legs swinging like human arms. This account is detailed in an email sent to the National Cryptid Society by Lon Strickler, publisher of the Phantoms and Monsters blog, who interviewed Danny and ended his email by writing, "Honestly, I believe the guy." Now, this obviously doesn't necessarily give more weight to the story as a whole, but Lon is a respected enough individual to get his emailed observations in the official article, and that is definitely worth noting no matter what. And the discovery by the previous Redditor of the article in the first place was a massive breakthrough in this investigation. But despite the good story Danny tells, one must still ask the question, what is in these images? The most obvious explanation is that it is a diseased canine, and for this section of the analysis I'm going to be using image 2 simply because it's clearer and easier to see the specific anatomy of the creature. And anatomy is a major reason why I have problems with the diseased canine theory. While there is evidence of animals injuring their forepaws and learning to walk extensively on their hind legs, just look into Petals the bear for instance, I don't believe this is the case with this creature for a number of anatomical reasons. Just to play devil's advocate for a moment, I believe this theory has merit in the idea that a wolf or other canine injured its forepaw and learned to walk in this way is certainly plausible. But I discount it because the anatomy of this creature does not line up with that of any existing canine. For starters, examine the length of the back legs compared to the front legs. The front legs are visibly shorter than the back legs, which is a trait not seen in any canine, despite dwarfs and toy breeds. It's definitely not apparent in any wolf species. While this could simply be a deformity in the animal, this canine would have to suffer from a staggering number of deformities in order to be a genuine animal. animal, and I'm going to show you why. Let's take a look at real-world canines standing on their hind legs. Here is a real wolf really standing upright. Notice first the shoulders of each animal. The creature seems to have broad human-esque shoulders. My bad. While wolves do not have this, simply due to their bone structure. Okay, not a big deal, right? Maybe the thicker body of the creature causes this appearance. Now let's look at how the canines hold their forelegs when standing. The wolf has a joint at the paw and at the quote-unquote elbow, which bends inward and downward respectively. We see this in our pets as well, and it becomes clear that when the elbow joint bends out, it forces that paw joint to bend down. You can see it gives this one a creepy looking Michael Jackson thriller pose. The creature, however, bends its elbow outwards and the paws remain level with the rest of the foreleg, a trait that is definitely more human-like than dog-like. This corroborates Danny's detail that it swung its arms like a human while walking, which would allow it to keep its balance better, but this is evidence strongly against the diseased canine theory. Already, the amount of deformities a real animal would have to have been born with and survived with seems insurmountable, but analyzing that curious skeletal-like arm provides even more. Many people have pointed out this strange-looking right foreleg of the creature and made the comment that it looks like bone. And it does. Assuming that it is just a diseased canine, many have theorized that the creature could have gotten stuck in a trap and escaped, ripping away the fur and tissue. This would account for the creature's jump to walking on its hind legs. There are issues with this theory as well, though, to say the least. Taking a look at these bones, we can clearly see a radius and ulna, as well as a distinct gap between the two bones. This is certainly a classic characteristic of human bones, and one that most people are familiar with. That's why the bone structure doesn't immediately seem off to most of us. But humans need this separation of bone because it allows us to rotate our arms and wrists in ways that other animals, especially animals that walk on all fours, have no need to do. Here's a gray wolf skeleton. Notice anything about the leg bones? There's almost no gap at all between the same bones we see on this supposed canine, which have a massive gap between them. We also aren't seeing that joint at the elbow on the creature, which is a very prominent aspect of the legs of real wolves. In fact, the creature's leg seems to run right up into a pocket of shoulder fur, a far cry from typical canine anatomy. That wraps up this long-winded anatomy portion of the video, and I'd like to remind you, the viewer, that I am by no means an expert in this field. Did you feel I've misrepresented anything or simply gotten facts completely wrong? Please let me know. Growth and learning is entirely a part of this process, and I can only do so through your corrections when I falter in my own research. Before we move on, though, I'd like to mention a few more odd speculative points. So let's look at how well fed this creature appears to be. Its body is thick and its hind legs look muscular. While more muscular hind legs and less muscular forelegs would make sense for a creature who mostly walks on its hind legs, the question still stands. How is this creature eating, assuming it is a diseased canine? Despite its obviously damaged foreleg, it appears mostly healthy. The fur isn't very patchy, its tail is bushy, and it seems as if it's having little problem finding food, something that even healthy strays in cities and towns overflowing with garbage have trouble doing. Other documented cases of such injured animals, again look at petals, hardly appear so healthy. So how is a canine with its flesh ripped from one of its forelegs outcompeting so many other individual animals? From a biological standpoint, it simply makes little sense. Such a deformed and wounded individual would surely die rather quickly. Now we've exhausted our natural explanations and gone into great detail on why they make little sense. Where does that leave us? In the realm of hoaxes, of course. And there's several ways Danny could have tackled this hoax, each with a great deal of work. Many individuals firmly believe that the creature is a botched taxidermy creation, perhaps one specifically designed to look strange and cryptid-like. Photoshop is also a possible contender in the realm of hoaxes, but I generally don't agree with this idea. The images are incredibly well done if this would be the case, and the continuity between the two images makes the idea even more impressive. Because the creature is in the same location and stance from multiple angles, I think the creature is something stationary in the environment, much like a taxidermy wolf. And surreal taxidermy is often just as possible among a subset of individuals as good taxidermy, and so the idea that this creature was created using these methods isn't entirely difficult to believe. And to me, the taxidermy option seems the most logical. Taxidermy would have made the images look so real, kept the continuity in the environment with ease, and with only a single witness on a dark back road, the taxidermy piece would have been easily transportable and concealable. Sure, it would have been a lot of work, but even if the images were simply photoshopped, their clarity and depth would have taken a lot of work to do as well. We are ultimately looking at a dedicated hoaxer. Thank you so much for traveling so far and wide with me in this epic opening to the saga to come. We have entered the darkness, unbound the evidence surrounding this set of images, and returned victorious. This time. But there's no telling where our quest for the truth will take us next. Will we slide into the icy depths of the dark oceans, our feeble flashlights searching for the massive beast that may lie just outside of their beam? Or will we slash through the fronds of the jungle plants in pursuit of long-dead monsters, hacking away at dangers unseen but always felt? Only time will tell.